On April 4, 1841, President William Henry Harrison died of pneumonia just 31 days into his presidential term. It was the first time a sitting U.S. president had died in office, and the young nation was completely unprepared for the fallout. The text of the Constitution offered little comfort. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 6, stated that in the event of a president's death, the powers and duties of the office would devolve on the vice president. But it didn't specify what that actually meant. Did the vice president become the actual president, or was he merely an acting president, keeping the seat warm until a special election? The man who suddenly found himself at the center of this legal black hole was John Tyler. He was a Southern strict constructionist who believed the federal government only had the exact powers explicitly listed in the Constitution. He had been placed on the Whig ticket entirely to balance the geographic map. Nobody intended for him to actually wield executive power. This ambiguity created an immediate crisis. The survival of the American executive branch now depended on how one unexpectedly elevated politician interpreted a single, vague constitutional clause. Tyler was at his Virginia plantation when a pair of messengers arrived at sunrise with the news. He mounted his horse and began a grueling relay of horseback and boat rides, arriving in Washington before dawn the next day. Once in the capital, Tyler made a unilateral decision. He gathered a local judge, took the presidential oath of office, and claimed the full title, absolute powers, and complete salary of the presidency. His political rivals and even his own cabinet tried to treat him as a temporary placeholder. Tyler refused to be diminished. When letters arrived at the White House addressed to the acting president, Tyler returned them unopened. By sheer force of will, Tyler ended the immediate constitutional crisis. He established that he was the president. But that same iron will immediately ignited a political war that would leave him isolated for the rest of his term. The most aggressive challenge came from Henry Clay, the powerful boss of Tyler's own Whig Party. Clay wanted to reestablish a massive national bank, and he expected the new executive to quietly sign the bill and fall in line. Tyler viewed the president and Congress as absolutely co-equal branches of government. He reportedly told Clay to go to his end of Pennsylvania Avenue and perform his duty in the Capitol, while Tyler would perform his duty at the White House. Sticking to his strict reading of the Constitution, Tyler determined the central bank bill was an overreach of federal power. He pulled out his pen and decisively vetoed it. The establishment retaliation was swift. Orchestrated by Clay, Tyler's entire cabinet, with the sole exception of Secretary of State Daniel Webster, resigned in protest on a single Saturday. 2 days later, Whig leaders formally expelled the president from his own political party. As this political siege peaked, tragedy struck his personal life. His wife, Letitia, who had been suffering from deteriorating health, died of a paralytic stroke in the White House. Tyler was now entirely alone. Tyler was now governing without a party or a cabinet. This total isolation tested the resilience of the executive office, proving that the branch could remain operational even when the president was abandoned by his own government. Rather than retreating, Tyler went on the offensive against congressional overreach. When the House of Representatives demanded sensitive documents regarding negotiations with Great Britain, Tyler invoked executive privilege. As seen in the record here, he formally withheld the correspondence to prevent detriment or danger to the public interests. He shielded Oregon Territory negotiations from the Senate. Moving to the main inset, the 1842 Webster-Ashburton Treaty settled this Canadian border, averting war with Britain. Finally, he bypassed Congress to annex Texas, seen south, signed just 3 days before leaving office. Tyler's independence allowed him to settle the nation's borders and annex the Republic of Texas, achieving major territorial growth without a single ally in Congress. Congress delivered one final insult on Tyler's last day. The legislature voted to override his veto of a minor funding bill, the first time a presidential veto had ever been overridden in U.S. history. Fast forward to 1861. As the United States stood on the brink of the Civil War, an aging John Tyler returned to Washington. He chaired a peace conference, hoping to broker a compromise and save the Republic. The conference failed, and here lies the tragic irony of Tyler's final days. His unyielding adherence to states' rights ideology ultimately led him to vote in favor of Virginia's secession. He had spent his White House years defending and stabilizing the United States government, yet he died in 1862 as an elected member of the Confederate Congress, turning his back on the very republic he had once helped keep operational. His choices in 1861 remain a dark chapter, but his actions in 1841 laid a structural bedrock that far outlasted his personal legacy. By forcefully claiming the presidency, he established the unwritten Tyler Precedent. This provided the stability that guided the nation through sudden deaths of future executives, allowing for an orderly transfer of power after the losses of Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, and Franklin Roosevelt. This precedent was so effective that it remained unwritten for over a century. Following the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Tyler's assumption of absolute power was finally codified into the Constitution as the 25th Amendment. John Tyler was an unpopular and isolated figure, but his refusal to yield in 1841 created a reliable blueprint for succession, turning what could have been a recurring constitutional crisis into a routine transfer of power.